So I messaged you and I was like, any chance that you had a donor as a father? When I got your message, I just started crying. And hearing your voice for the first time was amazing, to say the least.
I've been listening to NPR all day, and boy, do I feel smart.
So
I feel like a scholar.
We actually met for the very first time, and you ran up and hugged me.
I should donate.
The intense feelings inside. I just
listen for free.
We went to go have lunch
all the time, take advantage of everything.
There was like these two guys sitting next to our table, totally eavesdropping. I swear one of them even like pushed his chair over so he could hear us. I remember thinking, this is the first time I get to have a beer with my sister. I grew up thinking that it looked exactly like my mother until I met you. I remember us looking at each other and saying, oh, you have freckles. Yeah. And of course, the smile and the way our chins curve. I remember getting in the car and my husband said, I have a sister-in-law. And I was thinking, could this all be true? I just look forward to learning how to be a sister. It's such a weird thing to do at 28 years old. It's something we both have a learning to do, and we didn't get to grow up together. We will get to grow old together.
Alexandra Sanchez and her sister Courtney McKinney. Their StoryCorps interview will be archived at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. Major support for StoryCorps comes from Subaru, committed to doing its part to make the world a better place by supporting philanthropic initiatives in local communities. Learn more at Subaru.com/lovepromise. Love is what makes a Subaru a Subaru. And from Cancer Treatment Centers of America, whose 5,000 dedicated stakeholders are committed to delivering care that inspires stories of healing and hope for cancer patients every day. More at cancercenter.com. This is NPR News. President Trump wants to stop what he calls provocative joint military exercises with South Korea.
We will be stopping the war games, which will save us a tremendous amount of money.
I'm Audie Cornish. What does Trump mean by war games, and how much money would it save to scrap them? We'll ask a former director of national intelligence this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Rachel Martin. Demi Sweeney is a British college student who is really afraid of spiders. So when one showed up at her house and none of her friends were around to help her, she got desperate and she got creative. Sweeney ordered takeout, hoping the delivery guy would help her with the spider. It worked. Joe showed up with her KFC order and he swatted the spider and flushed it down the toilet.
KFC?
Posted her thanks
KFC
to Joe
delivered?
Telling him, you are an actual lifesaver. She better have tipped him, though. It's Morning Edition.
I didn't even know you could get KFC delivered. What the hell? That's just wrong.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Centrify, working to stop breaches with zero trust security through next-gen access, a combination that includes single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and privileged access management. Learn more at Centrify.com. From Sony Pictures Classics, presenting The Seagull, a new film adaptation of the drama starring Annette Bening, Saoirse Ronan, Corey Stoll, Elizabeth Moss, and Brian Dennehy, now playing. And from Americans for the Arts.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Rachel Martin. The U.S. has chosen the site for a tent city to house migrant children. Kids are to be held there as a former Walmart building and other facilities fill up. This is an effect of a policy pursued by the Trump administration.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions says that everyone apprehended at the border will be prosecuted and their children taken away. In the Southern District of Texas, along the Rio Grande, the U.S. Attorney is Ryan Patrick, who says prosecutions are up.
We're double what we were doing, easily double what we were doing just 2 months ago.
Ryan Patrick is from a prominent Texas political family. Appointed by President Trump, he follows a policy to prosecute even people fleeing violence who can legally apply for asylum. Do you assume that every single person crossing the border is a lawbreaker, full stop?
So what we are doing as a zero tolerance policy is we are prosecuting everyone that is referred to us by Border Patrol who is caught illegally entering the country.
Patrick says asylum seekers are crossing the border the wrong way, failing to line up at the regular ports of entry. His boss, Jeff Sessions, says welcoming asylum seekers in the past encouraged more people to seek asylum, and the U.S. wants to deter others.
In South Texas, particularly in the summer, these families are making this decision to cross the southwest border in the summer. It is hot. It is dangerous. They are paying coyotes to smuggle them across the border in sometimes very dangerous situations. It is not uncommon for some of our more sparsely populated and more desert counties down there to find a dozen or more bodies perish in the summer heat. And I don't want to see that happen.
So you're being fairly open here. This policy, a change in policy, a change in the way people are treated is intended as a deterrent. You don't want people to come. You want them to think twice about coming.
We are following the law. I mean, there's many people who...
But let's remember also, you can follow the law in a different way. Previous administrations have. This is a policy choice.
Well, it is a policy choice by the president and by the attorney general. One of the things that, I've heard the attorney general say, it is not, in his estimation, it is not equitable or fair to simply, like I said, wave a wand over an entire population of crossers just because they come in a family unit or they have a child with them, and we simply ignore them on the criminal prosecution. They're still crossing the border illegally.
What did you think about when, in your district, if I'm not mistaken, a father was separated from his child and committed suicide?
It is a tragic story. I'm aware of it. I can't comment on it because that did happen in our district. And it's been publicly reported that the Texas Rangers are investigating that. He was in custody in a local county jail. So I can't comment on that because at this point, I don't know what involvement our office may have in that case.
Oh, meaning that it's being investigated by state authorities, but for all you know, it could become a federal matter.
For all I know, it could be, yes.
What did you think about if you saw this? There's a public defender named Miguel Nogueras, who is in your district as well, who said that according to interviews with migrants that he's talked with, that people are told that their children are being taken for a break to play or to bathe or to sleep, and only later does it dawn on them that their children have been taken away.
I'm aware of those reports, but any specifics beyond what I've seen in the news that you're referring to, I'm not aware of those sort of specific instances or what the agents may or may not be telling folks when they're apprehended.
As a citizen, is that okay?
Well, look, I want the agents who are sworn to execute and uphold the law, whether they're Border Patrol agents or local police, to follow the law. And the Border Patrol agents don't fall under DOJ, our DOJ umbrella of agencies. That is a DHS issue. I've seen these stories. They are heartbreaking. I have 3 little children of my own. I'm not cold to these issues. I think some of these stories are outliers. This is not the norm. I don't think this is a standard operating procedure on how all of the agents conduct their business. There's going to be some situations that are going to be regrettable or that break your heart, and it is unfortunate.
Are the parents who are detained as well as the children who are detained, are they entitled to legal representation as you prepare to prosecute them?
So once we are done with our piece of it with the Department of Justice, They've come to court. They've been given a federal public defender. Public defender spends time with them, explains what their rights are, what they've been charged with. If they decide to plead guilty, the judge is there overseeing this entire process. One of the other things we did this week in our office is we had a judge in Brownsville raise some serious concerns on some of these situations and anecdotal stories like you mentioned. And we facilitated HHS and DHS, making sure we got the information to the judge that he wanted. So when apprehended, if they're a family unit, they're given a card in English and in Spanish that has different 1-800 numbers for them to be able to contact. And there's also a text line. There's an email address if they have access to those in their different holding facilities, where they can track not only their own case, but also the location of their child.
There have also been reports, you probably heard these, of people being given a card with the wrong number or an immigration tip line or a non-working number, that sort of thing.
I've heard those reports, and I can tell you that I have personally been involved in the process this week of getting the information on those 1-800 numbers and on those cards, making sure it's correct and getting them to the judge who had concerns in Brownsville.
But bottom line, if there's an adult whose kid has been separated from them, is the adult going to get a lawyer? Is the kid going to get a lawyer?
So the adult does get a lawyer in the criminal proceeding. In the civil proceeding on the deportation, that's a different issue. If there is a criminal conviction for illegal entry or illegal reentry, they can be, the entire family unit and that individual can be deemed an expedited removal. And there are laws that govern when there is a right to counsel or not a right to counsel. It is my understanding that there is not necessarily a right to counsel on an expedited removal. And then when it comes to the juveniles who are in HHS custody, there are some space limitations with attorneys. At any time in the process, they can hire their own attorney. I'm not aware of any legal provision that provides representation like it would in a criminal case in many civil proceedings on the deportation side.
As a father, what do you think about when you read about kids being housed in a Walmart, a former Walmart?
Well, it is the whole process as a dad, as a human, it is heartbreaking. But like I said, the Walmart you're referring to that's been in the news recently is a facility in Brownsville. What is surprising, I think, to many people is 70% of those kids in that facility came here by themselves, not even with a family.
So there's still an issue with unaccompanied minors as there was a few years ago. Okay, fine.
Yes, there is. So obviously there are still family units being broken up, but the average stay of those children in those facilities is less than 20 days. It would be incredibly difficult if I was a parent to see my child in one of those situations. But at the same time, it also is difficult to wrap my mind around, and I'm not in their situation, but they're also taking an incredible risk to their own life and safety on crossing the border illegally in the way that they do with their children and putting them in danger.
Ryan Patrick, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Farmers Insurance, committed to helping people prepare for changes to their home by offering farmers customizable home insurance packages. Coverage options and more can be found at farmers.com. From Staples, with printers, printer ink and toner cartridges for home and business, and in-store print shops for customized presentations, booklets, and manuals, in-store and online. Staples. And from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Rachel Martin. This week, we crossed the halfway mark in this year's primary elections. More than half the states have selected their congressional candidates for the midterm elections, which is a good opportunity to step back and look at patterns taking shape in these votes. NPR lead political editor Domenico Montanaro joins us now. Hey, Domenico.
Hi, Rachel.
Let's start with the Republicans. This week, the message was that if you cross President Trump, Republican voters are going to send you home. Is that the defining theme for Republicans this year?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it repeatedly in primary after primary that the theme on the Republican side is fealty to this president. We've seen it show up on the policy front on Capitol Hill, too. I mean, remember, these elections don't happen in a vacuum. I always view politicians through the lens of whether they can keep their jobs.
Right.
And if Republicans on Capitol Hill are seeing conservatives like Mark Sanford lose, like he did this week in South Carolina after Trump got against him, then you can be sure they're going to be much more reluctant to criticize him. In fact, the only ones we're seeing criticize him or stand against him on Capitol Hill are senators like Bob Corker from Tennessee or Jeff Flake from Arizona, two people who decided they'd rather retire than face primary voters.
Although we should point out, even though I think it's fair to say President Trump is an extraordinary president for a lot of different reasons, it is normal for candidates to get in line behind the chief executive of their own party.
Yeah, and some people, though, are more willing to criticize than others, at least in certain wings.
What about the Democrats? What's the big trend with them so far?
Well, while all the energy on the Republican side is still very much tied to the president's personality or cult of personality, as Bob Corker called it last week, the trend can't be ignored on the Democratic side that it's all about the power of women. Democratic women are clearly leading the resistance to President Trump. A record number of them are running for office, and they're winning primaries. Here are some numbers for you, okay? In House primaries so far, 103 Democratic women have won primaries out of 193 who've run.
Wow.
That's a pretty good winning percentage, more than half, 53%. On the Republican side, though, just 25 Republican women have won. That's compared again to 103 Democratic women who've won. Just 60 Republican women have run overall. Compare that to almost 200 on the Democratic side. You know, many of those women, though, are running in districts that Republicans are favored in. But as my colleague Mara Eliason likes to say, you have to have surfboards in the water to catch a wave.
So we have spent, the better part of the past year talking about the rifts in the Republican Party, as well as in the Democratic Party, especially after the 2016 election. So in this moment, are both parties as unified as they need to be this close to the election?
Well, they are both fairly unified in the kinds of candidates that they need. I mean, Democrats we've seen so far put off this sort of intra-party fight because they're probably leaving that toward the 2020 knockdown, throwdown battle that's going to take place in the primary. Because so far they're
It just got real with new U.S.-China and China-U.S. trade penalties.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Progressive Insurance, comparing car insurance rates from multiple insurers so shoppers can evaluate options in one place. Now that's Progressive. Comparisons available at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. And by Carbonite, offering data protection solutions for businesses, including automatic backup for servers, endpoint protection, high availability and disaster recovery, and data migration. Learn more at carbonite.com.
I'm David Brancaccio in New York. U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods were first explored, then proposed. Today, President Trump approved 25% import penalties on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods to take effect July 6th. Marketplace's Jennifer Pack in Shanghai has some details.
The White House broke down its tariffs into two lists. The first includes previously announced items in 800 categories, including machine tools and TVs. There's also a second list of some 280 items, such as railway trains and optical fibers, which will require public feedback before tariffs will be imposed. These products are part of the strategic areas the Chinese government is supporting under the Made in China 2025 plan to drive economic growth. But the U.S. says this policy will hurt America and its firms. There have been high-level trade talks between the two countries, but now China's Ministry of Commerce says any agreements reached through these talks will be voided. China also says it will retaliate with tariffs in equal measure and scale. American planes, beef, whiskey, and most importantly, soybeans are likely targets.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let's do the numbers. Market players say the tariffs and counter tariffs are injecting uncertainty. The Dow is down 233 points, 0.9%. The S&P 500 down 0.6%. Similar percentage drop for the NASDAQ. There's a move into bonds with the 10-year yield down at 2.89%. Now, the sequel to the animated superhero movie The Incredibles opens across the country today. The original film back in 2004 grossed more than $600 million worldwide. Marketplace's Renato Sego has more on this slow-to-arrive sequel.
Combustion imminent? What does that mean? Ah!
This trailer for The Incredibles 2 sequel got 46-year-old James Clark and his wife excited when they first saw it about 6 months ago. And today's release date is their twins' 5th birthday, so they snagged pre-sale tickets.
For like a 5 o'clock or something like that showing.
And advanced sales like those have broken the ticket-selling company Fandango's 18-year pre-sale box office record for animated films. That's according to Fandango's Eric Davis.
By anticipation for sure.
But why the 14-year lag between films? Sean Springer teaches 3D animation at Full Sail University near Orlando. But he used to work for Pixar, the Disney-owned studio that produced the film. He says the company's been focused on other projects, but recent success of superhero films may have sparked renewed interest in The Incredibles.
It could have something to do with Disney saying, hey, look at the money that Marvel's making. You know, superheroes are big.
And one of the superpowers animated heroes have? They don't age, even when the fan base does. I'm Renata Sego for Marketplace.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by the Candida Fund, working to advance individual dignity and sustainable communities through investments in transformative leaders and ideas. Learn more at KENDEDAfund.org. And by Exact Sciences, offering Cologuard for average-risk adults over 50. Cologuard is a non-invasive colon cancer screening test that can be used at home. Available by prescription only. Information at cologuardtest.com. And by Fidelity Investments, taking a personalized approach to helping clients grow, preserve, and manage their wealth. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
World Cup Soccer, second day today. France versus Australia, Argentina, Iceland, Peru, Denmark, Croatia, Nigeria, USA versus nobody. The Americans didn't qualify for this World Cup, and it conjures the ghost of a World Cup 20 years ago. You may know soccer commentator Roger Bennett from Men in Blazers on NBC. He's got a new podcast produced by public station WNYC about the U.S. team in 1998. Podcast is called American Fiasco. Roger, glad to finally connect.
David, it is an honor to be with you.
We'll get to the famous 1998 problem in just a second, but let's go 4 years earlier. 1994, the U.S. hosts the World Cup in this country, and it works out well, doesn't it?
Before the World Cup, it was almost impossible to make a professional living as a soccer player in the country. There was no domestic league, very few European teams trusted American talent. The World Cup changed everything, changed lives. They were suddenly on cereal boxes. Hollywood agents were swooping around. An NFL team tried to pluck the goalkeeper and make him a kicker, suddenly you could make a professional career and then some.
Sport notices, athletes notice, advertisers, networks notice. So 4 years from then, the next World Cup, the U.S. is really going to rock. So what? The engines of commerce really start turning at that point.
Absolutely. Not just for the soccer players, but the whole soccer industry. You could suddenly make a job as a journalist, as a coach, in the back office. There were hundreds and hundreds of people entering this new industry, American soccer. Your players were like, in 1994, we showed the world we could belong. What are we going to do in the next World Cup? They charged into the 1998 World Cup, in which they were drawn to play Iran. And instead of collective play, which had got them through 1994, the economic self-interest just destroyed that team. They came dead last, scored 1 goal, humiliated themselves with a nation, with the world watching, and their narrative was more, it was still American, David, but it was more kind of like Scarface meets Apocalypse Now.
Now, look, in professional sports, in all sports, you win some and you lose some, but you regard what happened in 1998 to the U.S. team
It's been a big week of news in Washington and also in the Mountain West, so we left the Beltway for a different view of what matters to America, and we like it here. From WAMU and NPR, this is 1A. Hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson, visiting KUER Public Radio in Salt Lake City. Today on 1A, it's a special Mountain West edition of the Friday News Roundup. What happens in the nation's capital matters here. That includes the president's new tariffs targeting goods from Canada, Europe, and as of today, China. Net neutrality is also a big concern for rural Westerners. How will the end of those rules affect them? Also, Native American candidates hope to win big this November, and Utah's LGBT community has had a busy week. We'd love to hear from you. Comment on our Facebook page or tweet us at 1A.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. A federal judge has ordered former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort to jail as he awaits the start of his conspiracy trial later this year. NPR's Carrie Johnson reports the judge said that Manafort's actions posed a threat to her, in her words, the integrity of the justice system.
Judge Amy Berman Jackson says she struggled with the decision about whether to revoke Paul Manafort's bail. Special counsel prosecutors accused him of committing a new crime, witness tampering, while he was free on supervised release. The judge says Manafort abused the trust the court placed in him 6 months ago, and she ordered him to jail while he waits for trial. Manafort left the courtroom flanked by security officers. As he neared the door, Manafort turned and waved to his wife. Defense lawyers had no immediate comment, but in court, they signaled they might appeal. Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
Trump tweeted just a short time ago that it's very unfair that Manafort is being sent to jail. The president is praising his own decision to impose steep tariffs on about $50 billion worth of Chinese imports. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the move represents the latest escalation in the administration's trade war with China.
The tariffs target more than 1,000 products in categories such as aerospace, robotics, and industrial machinery. The administration tried to steer clear of consumer products like televisions and apparel. President Trump said in a statement the tariffs are a response to unfair trading practices by China, including the theft of intellectual property and forced transfer of technology secrets. The trade levies have been in the works since March, although some factions of the administration hope they might be avoided. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross was in China less than 2 weeks ago trying to broker a compromise. China has promised immediate retaliation with tariffs of its own on U.S. exports. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions is continuing to defend the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy toward illegal immigration. Speaking in Scranton, Pennsylvania today, Sessions says it's the job of law enforcement to crack down on the number of people living in the U.S. illegally.
There's an estimated 11 million illegally in the country today. That's the population size of the state of Georgia. Pennsylvania alone has 180,000 illegal aliens. That's more than the population of Allentown.
The House will vote on 2 immigration bills next week, one conservative proposal and one compromise bill. The vote comes as debate rages over the Trump administration's policy of separating families who cross the southern border illegally and those seeking asylum. On Wall Street, the Dow was down 219 points. This is NPR News. A ceasefire is in effect between the Afghan government and the Taliban. NPR's Dia Hadid reports it's expected to last for 3 days over the duration of the Muslim holiday of the Eid.
The government and the Taliban both announced unilateral ceasefires, and they overlap for the next 3 days. It's a rare goodwill gesture in Afghanistan, where multiple efforts to begin peace talks have faltered. The ceasefires don't include the battle against ISIS, which repeatedly strikes civilians in Kabul. The Taliban say their ceasefire doesn't include foreign forces. Those are US troops and NATO. And yet, the UN welcomed the ceasefires, however modest. And the president, Ashraf Ghani, told local media that he hoped the ceasefires could be built upon and extended. Dia Hadid, NPR News, Islamabad.
Military officials say Turkish fighter jets killed 26 Kurdish militants in airstrikes in northern Iraq. NPR's Peter Kenyon reports the cross-border operations are expected to continue.
The military says the airstrikes took place earlier this week in the Kandil Mountains of northern Iraq. It's difficult terrain from where the militant Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, has launched attacks against Turkey for more than 30 years. Ankara says it wants to clear the PKK from northern Iraq once and for all. Turkey, the U.S., and EU list the PKK as a terror organization.
That's NPR's Peter Kenyon reporting from Istanbul. Stocks are continuing to trade lower at this hour on Wall Street. The Dow was down 215 points, the Nasdaq down 26, the S&P down 12. This is NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include LogMeIn, makers of GoToMeeting, a collaborative meeting platform with over 18 million monthly users. Designed to connect people from anywhere in the world on any device. Learn more at gotomeeting.com.
This is 1A. I'm Joshua Johnson, visiting KUER Public Radio in Salt Lake City. There's a lot of news coming out of Washington this week, like every week, but this week, we're doing something different. Since we're in Utah, we're reviewing some of the week's top domestic news with a focus on how it impacts the Mountain West, including Utah, Colorado, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. For instance, farmers in Utah and Idaho are concerned about new tariffs. Trade is now a key political issue in the Utah Senate race. A historic number of Native American women are running for office, including for Congress and for governorships. Montana has more than a dozen Native Americans running for the state house just this year. We'll also discuss stories from the Mountain West that the rest of the nation tends to ignore, like a recent march and prayer vigil on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana. It was to raise awareness about the disappearance of a young woman named Ashley Loring Heavyrunner. Activists say that Native American women are sexually assaulted and murdered at alarming rates. Also, the FCC's repeal of the net neutrality rules could have big effects in rural mountain communities, and we'll look ahead to wildfire season after 8 homes burned in Moab, Utah this week. Joining us here at KUER in Salt Lake City is its managing editor, Julia Ritchie. Julia, welcome to 1A.
Pleasure to be here.
Joining us from Montana Public Radio in Missoula is Nate Hedgie, a reporter for Mountain West News Bureau. Nate, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Joining us from Albuquerque, New Mexico is Antonia Gonzalez, an anchor and producer for the National Native News and a member of the Navajo Nation. Antonia, glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
And joining us from KRCC Public Radio in Colorado Springs is Ali Budner, Southern Colorado reporter for the Mountain West News Bureau. Ali, welcome to 1A.
Thanks so much for having me.
We also welcome your questions and thoughts about the week's big news, whether you are in the Mountain West or anywhere across the country. So email us 1A